1984 is finally over. I'm not gonna lie, this year was pretty rough. The overall challenge each of these games posed to me heavily increased since 1983, meaning I spent a lot of time just grinding out the same stuff with little to show in the actual series. Unlike previous bonus videos, I don't really have anything new to show off here. I mentioned the PC 8001 port of Mario Bros. In a previous video, and I still unfortunately can't play it. There's the two missing Saturday Supercade Season 2 episodes, and the only other thing to talk about is Family Basic, which I'll talk about in the next video. This leaves this as a cleanup episode to show things I should have talked about already but was too lazy or forgot about it. First is the fact that Versus Pinball's Bubbles cameo was actually different in the Japanese version. There, it's instead an Achilles bird from Family Basic. I couldn't actually find any other videos on YouTube showing this, but I'm pretty sure I might have just missed them. Next is a comparison between all the versions of NES golf courses in the ports. Even when making this Dragon Match golf video, I realized I should have done this, but was in such a rush to upload the video that I didn't do it. Now that I've kind of covered ladies golf, I could show the differences between all of them. Somehow that's it in terms of cleanup, but I do want to do one more thing. 1984 is the end of the first era of the Mario series in my mind. To be clear, there's no actual distinction between eras from Nintendo themselves, but there's definitely periods of time where you could tell the overall vibe of the series changes. 1985 has the game that most people think of as the first in the Mario series, and it marks the most dramatic shift in pretty much every element of the series. In that way, I think 1984 is the end of the arcade era, so I want to talk about the overall story we've been given so far for these characters. If you think of the Mario franchise as one large overarching story, I'm just getting to the end of the prologue. This is going to be a simplified synopsis of the events we've seen so far. I'm only going to be mentioning the game events because all of the external media is most definitely not set in the same continuity. As for the games, some of them I definitely think are canon, some I'm kind of unsure on, and others I definitely don't think are canon. I'll mention as many games as I can, but I will have a notice on screen if I don't think those games are canon to the greater continuity. The earliest event I would have to guess is Mario's time in the military. People tend to think of this as Vietnam, but there's nothing explicitly stating what war this is. He delivers bombs from one ally to another as his orders, he blows up a few enemy troops, but in the end accidentally blows up his allies. He's presumably discharged after this. Next we see him, he's become a carpenter and is the owner of Donkey Kong and is watching a circus performance from him, and laughing at his antics. This angers Donkey Kong enough that he breaks out and kidnaps Mario's girlfriend, Pauline. Mario has to fight off sapient fire, which will continue to plague him in the future, and dodge obstacles thrown by Donkey Kong. At the top, he pulls rivets from the girders and causes Donkey Kong to fall, saving Pauline. Mario captures Donkey Kong and takes him to the jungle, where Donkey Kong's son, Donkey Kong Jr., comes to rescue him. In this time, Mario has somehow gained access to tons of little mechanical beasts in his own evil lair. He's kind of an asshole here. He sends the Snapjaws and Nitpickers at Junior, but Junior manages to evade them and gives chase to Mario. He chases him from the jungle all the way to Mario's hideout, and manages to unlock all the chains, keeping his father captive. Donkey Kong punches Mario away, and the father and son escape. I think a tricky thing to cover is the Game & Watch ports of the arcade games. The Game & Watch Donkey Kong features a character named Mini Donkey Kong as the alarm mechanic. The plot description of Arcade Donkey Kong Jr. mentions that once Jr. saves his father, he'll accompany him in capturing maidens. The actual events seen in this port are clearly different enough that I don't think it's the same event. You could either interpret this as happening right before the arcade game or after the Donkey Kong Jr. arcade game. I'm leaning more towards the latter, mostly because of far future info where it'll be implied that Donkey Kong kidnapping maidens was a recurring thing rather than a one-off event. There's also 3 separate Donkey Kong Jr. Game & Watch adaptations, though not as much fun side details to base things off of. Once again, this could either be directly before the arcade game or after the Donkey Kong Game & Watch port. I think in the original videos I suggested the former, though my opinion is leaning towards the latter now. Donkey Kong Jr. math also exists, which is kind of a big question mark to me. There's the original kind of half-finished mode for Junior plus Junior math lesson, which has the lesson mode happen while Donkey Kong is kidnapped. Definitely don't think that's canon. The proper release recontextualizes this as Donkey Kong actually teaching his son, though it's set weirdly in Mario's hideout, so I'd assume this is after Mario runs away. The competitive mode has a second pink Donkey Kong Jr. known just as Junior the Second. This would imply that Junior has an identical twin with the same name who never shows up again. Mario also plays hockey against Donkey Kong at some point. After all this Donkey Konging, both Mario and Donkey Kong go their separate ways. Donkey Kong also abandoned his son for some reason. He travels to a greenhouse owned by a weaselly little piece of garbage named Stanley, who has had previous issues with insects trying to attack his plants. Donkey Kong riles up all the bugs, so Stanley has to take care of them and try to push Donkey Kong back into the hives to knock him out. These bugs are intelligent enough to create spears to lob at their enemies, and multiple different species can work together to defeat a common enemy. Also, Stanley's flowers have faces. The Game & Watch port shows that Donkey Kong grabs a sprayer of his own at some point during the kerfuffle to use against Stanley. I assume this is before he starts climbing to the ceiling. After this, Donkey Kong escapes for the foreseeable future. In the Hudson Softverse, Stanley continues chasing Donkey Kong after defeating him, chasing him to the countryside where they're abducted by aliens and brought to other planets. They end up on a moon of Saturn, the homeworld of the aliens, and continue fighting. The presence of a pyramid and some Nazca lines from the alien planet makes me believe the implication is that these aliens are ones from all the conspiracy theories. A giant nuclear bomb goes off behind them, but they still continue to fight endlessly. Maybe they're in hell, because I sure was when playing that game. Mario begins looking for new lines of work. He works at a cement factory but ends up getting fired. Then he reunites with his brother Luigi, and the two work at a brick factory before also getting fired. The two join the wrecking crew and compete against each other to destroy as much as they can while being chased by weird mechanical creatures called gotcha wrenches. The ghostly fire continues to chase Mario at his new job. Mario showcases his sporty side here by playing golf and being a referee for a few tennis matches. In one of the many Punch-Out verses, he watches some boxing matches alongside Luigi, Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong Jr. He also is inside a pinball machine with Pauline at some point. The final thing we know of that Mario does is become a plumber alongside his brother. The two head into the city's sewers and begin fighting off giant turtles, crabs, and flies. The ghostly fire still continues to plague Mario, but now there's also ghostly ice. The two keep heading deeper into the sewers, though we don't know how this story ends just yet. Hudson Soft does give their own version of how this goes. They find a bunch of weird architecture in the sewers and have to solve puzzles and collect money to continue. At some point, they stay in the sewers for long enough that they lose all of their memories of the civilized world and only know the glory of Punchball. I'm gonna just go on a limb here and say that's definitely not canon. So our story so far is pretty much just a modern world with the occasional wacky mechanical creature or elemental spirit popping up. They're also intelligent animals, not only with the Kong family, but also the bugs of Stanley's greenhouse. It'd be inaccurate to say the series is going for anything realistic, but it's definitely not full fantasy just yet. There's been a few connections to other series, but I think getting into crossover web shenaniganry is a good way to lose track of what's going on. And that's 1984. 1985 should be a kind of short one given the small amount of games, though the scope of the games definitely is going to grow from now on. Thanks to anybody who's been watching through so far. I do genuinely appreciate your support.